Hi, and welcome to the very first episode ever of Colloquialist History. I'm Sarah, and I am a historian. This YouTube channel is focused on being an archive of short historical stories, anecdotes, mini biographies, events, various things that happened throughout history, retold in an easy to understand, quick to understand way. People don't have to sit down and take the time to read a big, huge biography that's this thick just to be able to know what someone did with their life. Now, obviously, the more detail that you can learn from those books, the better. This is going to be a very short, simplified version of those events. Today, I wanted to introduce some historical concepts by talking about sources. Sources are the core of any historical analysis or argument, and without sources, we don't have any understanding of history or what happened. There are three core types of historical sources. You have primary sources, secondary sources, and tertiary sources. So I wanted to go over what exactly each one is, what's good about them, and what's bad about them. A primary source is a first-hand account of an event or story. Examples would include diaries, financial records, newspaper articles, art, music, hospital records, oral histories. All of these are written by the people who lived the events. One of the issues with primary sources is going to be things like translation. Not everyone can read Old English. A translation is going to be a kind of bridge between a primary source and a secondary source, because a translation puts one more filter between that original primary source and how we read it. A primary source is also going to be limited by social guidelines at the time. A newspaper article about LGBT protesters in the 1930s is going to have a very different view of those protesters than one written in 2019. Looking at who is writing the source, what is their perspective, who are they writing about, how are they portrayed, is this a fair portrayal of those people? These are all very important things to be critical of when you are looking at or analyzing a primary source document. A secondary source is a second-hand account. It utilizes primary sources to gain information and often will synthesize multiple primary sources. Examples of secondary sources are going to be textbooks, biographies, reviews of books, articles. It is inputting a secondary opinion onto that original source. They might analyze those primary sources in ways that you have not thought of. For example, maybe they apply a feminist lens to something that you would not have thought to apply that feminist lens to. They can also synthesize sources together to produce a more complete picture of the time period. However, a secondary source is only viewing information through the lens of the author of it. An article written about LGBT protesters, again, in 2019 versus in 1930s, those are going to be two different arguments. So you have to be critical when you're viewing these secondary sources to look, once again, at who is the author? What are they trying to convince you of? What are they arguing? How might this be an incomplete picture of the event or person that they are writing about? The third kind of source is going to be tertiary sources. Now, these are not brought up anywhere near as much in history classes, and this is because they are what is considered background information. It's not utilized for in-depth research. You would not quote a tertiary source in a paper. These are going to be things like encyclopedias, dictionaries, indexes. Wikipedia is a tertiary source. They are jumping off points for you to then go off and find primary and secondary sources for your research purposes. So there are our three kinds of sources: primary, first-hand accounts; secondary, second-hand accounts; and tertiary, background information. If you're interested in hearing more historical stories told in not necessarily academic wording, please like, rate, subscribe, and I will see you guys all in 2 weeks for the first biography video we have coming up on Saint Perpetua. Hope to see you then. Bye.